I recently went on a trip to Maui in the Hawaiian Islands and spent a lot of time on this beach here at Kapalua. And I was admiring this sort of clubhouse restaurant building on the point here and thought it would be a fun thing to sketch. So I luckily brought my art journal, which is filled with really nice watercolor paper. This is a Strathmore art journal, or I guess it's called a visual journal. And then I brought a small tray of paints that are identical to the paints in my large tray that I use in the studio. And most of those are Daniel Smith colors. So I decided to start with the sky, which is a really, really pale blue this day. And when I started painting, there was a tiny little cloud there, so just left some white and did a wet on dry wash just to keep it very gradual. And then I decided to put some of that beautiful watercolor in. My photo here below doesn't really capture the color. It's much more of an aqua green going into blue. And so I used some of my, I believe it's a cobalt green, mixed in with some of the cerulean that I used for the sky, along with a little bit of ultramarine. And just use more or less green depending on how the water changed color from distant to close up. And now I just mixed a neutral to fill in the roof color there on that building. And most of my neutrals here are made up of a burnt umber and an ultramarine blue. There might be a little bit of in-down-thrown blue. And sometimes when I work outside like this, I mix in a little bit of the color that I'm using for the water or the sky just to make sure that it all goes together well. So there may be a little bit of cerulean in there, a little bit of already some ultramarine, and it doesn't look like I put any of the green in there. But here, just mixing some different greens. As you see from the photo, there's some yellow greens and some more blue greens. And usually I try to knock those greens down a little bit by adding in a complement. So sometimes instead of red, I usually put in a little bit of brown because I'm already using that in the neutrals above. So I put in a little bit of burnt umber just to knock it down a little bit, make it look a little more natural. So a lot of this painting is using some of the same colors, just mixing them in different ways. The greens, I believe I put a tiny bit of yellow ochre in, especially in the lighter areas, and maybe a little bit of lemon yellow just to lighten those and make them look more of a yellow-green. Now I'm just using a little tiny little detail brush to put in the trunks of the palm trees. And from here it's really hard to see what color those are. All you really see is a line of shadow and a line of light. So I just quickly put in some neutral there that I used on the roof just to show you where those trunks are. And I think it's kind of fun to put those in just because the lines are interesting. Nothing is straight, nothing is perfectly curved. They all grow in their own interesting shape. Now really important to get those darks in where the shadow is in the rocks. And so just mix more of my neutral, just mixed it darker. And so sometimes if I can't get it dark enough, I try to get as much of the burnt umber on my brush and then a little bit of in-down-thrown blue instead of the ultramarine because it's darker and it holds its color more in the water. Be careful with the in-down-thrown blue because you can get too much of it and pretty soon everything's turning that color. So just a little tiny bit is enough to do it. It's enough to give you that shadow and the contrast that you need. So now just finishing up, as you can see, I put I used my little brush to add the palm leaves, and you don't need to put every detail in the palm leaves. It's enough to just get the general shape and the feel that they're kind of blowing in the wind. And so the wind was going in my picture from left to right, And so you could kind of tell that they're blowing in one direction. And even though they're kind of swirling around a little bit right now, it's okay to have them blow in one direction in your painting just to give that feeling of motion and an understanding that there's some wind here. Now I like to go back and forth between my watercolor pencils and my watercolors when I'm doing a plein air sketch like this, because then it gives me time to wait for the paint to dry, but I don't have to be bored and sit and wait for it. I can use my pencils and add some detail. And I like the way that the pencil melts into the water when it's a little bit wet and gives you that nice mark. It almost looks like ink here. And now don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and stop by and check out my webpage, my Facebook page, or take a look at my Instagram account if you'd like to learn more about me, my art, and my children's book illustrations.